Welcome everyone to Growth Sessions. Today, our guest is Aisha Khan, former GM of Forum Brands, former Chief Strategy Officer at Packable, all-encompassing, amazing person in the wonderful world of e-commerce and retail media. Aisha, thank you for being here. Really appreciate having you.
No, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today.
All right. Would love to get into a topic that you're particularly passionate about. And I think everyone is talking about it or has been talking about it for the past few years, but maybe people are not providing the resources required to be particularly good at it. And that is the power of full funnel advertising and the importance of investing in brand. And would love to know why you're so passionate about this topic and how people should be thinking about this today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's particularly become such a fascination for me because I've spent so much of my career in e-commerce, lower funnel, and in performance. And so I've seen and I've worked across the gamut of large CPG brands, small brands, D2C brands, disruptor brands, commodity brands, just brands that are maybe great sellers on Amazon but don't have a brand. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I've just seen what a difference branding can make in those lower funnel performance. And because the world has traditionally been somewhat siloed, I've had to advocate and sometimes defend performance in situations where actually some of the onus on that is upper funnel. But when teams are siloed and strategies are siloed, it can sometimes be tough to connect the dots. And so I'm just very passionate about connecting those dots. That's really where it's coming from, is I've just seen the difference it can make in brands. How I think about it is really what the definition of branding is. If you think about branding, it's really an emotional connection with the consumers. It can happen at many touch points, but people have really overcomplicated branding. And what it really is, you think about for 100 years, the Mad Men days, great brands have really been built the same way. You need to have, and at the start, so important because you need to have a great story, brand identity, your product market fit. A lot of that's decided at inception. So if you think about investors, that's something that they look at and they're so passionate about, right? You hear about founder stories being so important to success of a company. And so that's why, because so many of these strategic decisions are created at inception. But then on an ongoing basis, you need to have great creative. You need to have great copy. And so the full funnel, like everyone knows the funnel's collapsing. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. But I think what's really interesting is you still need to be good at creative and copy. And with digital marketing, you've almost been able to get away with mediocre creative and copy. You can just be really good at gamifying digital marketing, performance marketing, and still grow. But now you actually need to be good at branding again. That's one of my predictions and hypotheses for next year. And I've just seen what a difference that can make. And so reminding brands to really invest there. Hopefully next year, we'll see some great brands do that.
Yeah, and you haven't needed to invest in brand to be good at Amazon for almost the past many years. And define good, like there's great, but in theory, your brand was effectively and has effectively just been deduced to ratings and reviews and that little image that you have as your hero image on your PDP. And now as something like an Amazon and other e-commerce marketplaces and retailers are becoming more and more competitive, that's not the way you win. You can only optimize ratings and reviews in that one image. To a certain extent, there's a ceiling on the level of optimization that you can have. If you unbundle this, everyone right now is talking about the importance of full funnel and brand marketing at the top of the funnel is one aspect of this, obviously. But effectively, what you're saying is that what people are forgetting is brand design. And then additionally, how you communicate and engage with your customers and prospects, which thereby become your ongoing brand identity, in addition to investments that need to be made at the top of the funnel to continue to communicate to your customers in that way, right?
Absolutely, 100%. There's just tactics that are shifting from competitive advantage to just table stakes. Content, right, being one of them, like ratings and reviews, right? Like all these things have just become table stakes where in the past, they could have been competitive advantage. And so the upside for 2023 is going to be, listen, you just have to be good at SEO. You have to be good at content, but everyone's kind of getting good at these things, like even advertising, execution and optimization. There's a lot of tactics that used to be innovative that now just everyone's good at, right? Technologies like Perpetua are really democratizing that. Now I think the upside and outsized biggest returns and market shares are going to be from the folks that are at the next frontier. And ironically, I think that's actually going back to basics. And so the next frontier is actually what is good creative and what is attention. There's a lot of interesting kind of innovation happening around how do you measure attention instead of just like CPMs for video, for example. And so I'm excited to see where that goes next year.
So what is good creative, and what are the levers that people can pull to improve their creative, whether you be a 3P seller on Amazon, multinational CPG brand, within the world of marketplaces and e-commerce? What are the levers that you can be pulling to improving your creative that people may or may not be doing today?
Yeah, I think it's really just the simplification of the content and just making sure that you're communicating what makes your product different from your competitors in your content as simply as possible. It's looking at obviously what competitors are doing, testing and learning with conversion, but also just having conviction. You'll know good creative when you see it. Obviously doing surveys, and there's technologies out there like PickFu and Visit that will use AI or surveys to actually give you data-driven creative recommendations, which I think is another great frontier for next year and a great area of growth in the industry and for technology. But really it's just about like really investing behind it, like actually having great designers behind it, taking great photography. So I think it's less around what does good look like and just are you investing behind the talent that's putting together your creative. I think agencies and even in-house teams for photography and copy will be major investment areas next year, or at least should be for brands that want to succeed.
And then obviously some of the challenges, if you're playing steelman, devil's advocate on the brand side, we're in a recession. Why should I be investing in this? What's going to be my immediate impact on sales if I invest in it? How would you respond to that argument?
Yeah. Oh man, that's an easy one. It's like conversion rate, right? You're spending so much money to drive traffic to these PDPs, and this content has such an impact to conversion rates. And you can double your conversion rate in a day with better creative, right? That's really the power I think brands will start to realize and go is it's been such a traffic game, and now it's becoming a little more of a conversion game. And like what actually converts? What are the keywords that actually convert? What's the content that then converts against those keywords? Can you expand the keywords that convert or enhance conversion on keywords just by like some title changes, creative changes? That is going to be really interesting to see the science that evolves behind that next year.
And who's doing a good job at this? Who are some brands that aspirationally other brands should look up to that's clearly excelling in this space?
I think from an overall content perspective, some like L'Oreal as a big CPG, I think does a really good job because beauty inherently is just super competitive. But I actually think some of the aggregators, like even Thrasio has some brands that does a really good job at this because they just have to by design. If you think about the model of acquiring brands with maybe not great or mediocre content, that's one of the biggest optimization points. That's why they buy these brands. They see the vision of the content and being in that world and making those changes and then seeing the difference. I think the aggregators are just good at it because it has to be a part of their business model. And so I'd look to some of their brands as good examples, but I think L'Oreal is a really good one from a large CPG perspective.
For people that are unfamiliar with what a Thrasio brand is, are there any that are top of mind that you want to call out?
Yeah, their big popular one is that Angry Orchard brand with Snoop Dogg. I think that is just such clean creative. They do a great job of like external branding, generating ratings and reviews just by being first to market and just innovating in the space. So that'd be that's one brand that's top of mind.
One brand that I'm always particularly intrigued by, and I know that you are as well, is Liquid Death in the wonderful category of water, in which water is the most undifferentiated, ready-to-drink product that you could possibly have in market, yet they've seemingly been able to craft a very unique brand story in which people now resonate and buy merch for a water brand.
They do. A big shout out to Dan Murphy over there, who's a friend of mine, and their SVP of marketing. Yeah, they do a great job with creative and just being a part of culture. Again, in the Mad Men days and the height of like brand advertising, that's really what it was. It was about being part of cultural, is being part of the moment, what's happening in the now, what's going to resonate. And so Liquid Death has just done a great job of that. And they really lean into innovation. They're not afraid to get weird. They really have their finger on the pulse of culture. And they've done a great job. And their content shows that. What's really interesting is their D2C site, actually, it's not even a D2C site, it's a website. And it's commerce enabled, but through Amazon. So I think they even realize the costs of D2C are really high, and there's actually benefits and brand building that can be done by driving folks to Amazon, having them purchase, and then leave ratings and reviews just because of the store influence sales and Walmart and Target, convenience. That even happens through Amazon. That's a really interesting strategy for such a large, successful brand.
So you can't check out natively on their D2C. There's no magical accumulation of first party data on my D2C ability to engage with customers. They're saying, hey, like all of these costs that are occurred on D2C, we're going to forego them and send them to Amazon, albeit end up paying them via a variety of Amazon fees, and say, hey, we're really good at engaging with our customers through other channels via our brand. We don't need to pay the price of 1P data.
Exactly. They do a really great job at email signups. It's like pretty much one of the core focuses of the site is email signups. Little bit of brand building, but not so much. It's not a very cluttered site at all. And just store locator. And if you want to click on a PDP, you can learn more about the products and just buy an Amazon button. It's really simple.
Yes, all of these things with building a brand. But if we even get back to that initial question about brand marketing and investing in upper funnel advertising in particular, what does that mean done right? What do proper brand marketing awareness investments mean from both a capital perspective, a measurement perspective, and an overall feedback loop across the company on these are the investments that we're making, and this is the trickle down effect of what those investments might be?
One of my favorite Harvard Business Review articles is don't measure yourself to death. And I think that's really what's happening is just remembering that upper funnel is hard to measure by design. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. There's got to be alignment around the measurement of upper funnel and impressions and just what that means. And yeah, you can get targeted about impressions, but if you have great creative and even a decent direction of audience. If I think about Meta and what's happened to Meta, right? Everybody's like, oh, Meta doesn't work. Meta doesn't work. That is still a great platform for mass reach and mass awareness. You can't get as targeted as maybe you could in the past, obviously. But if you have great creative, going to an audience of females, 25 to 35, you can still generally hit a pretty large audience for a low cost, even through Meta. If you have great creative, you're getting great reach for a pretty great efficient cost. As I think about what that means as an organization, it's just remembering the role of upper funnel, the importance of it, the impact to lower funnel where it is easy to be measured. And so I think for next year, just being responsible around budget choices. Obviously, there'll probably be some budget cuts for brands next year. So just being responsible around where those are coming from and remembering that that needs to be a big part of the budget allocation process. And there's a lot of empirical data out there of the 60-40, like having at least 60% of your budget going into upper funnel and then really focusing on closing the deal or the lower part of the funnel with the 40%. But I think it's just shifted a little bit, unfortunately, in the last 5-6 years with conversion and lower funnel getting more attention. So we'll see next year how that shifts.
I think that's really interesting that effectively what you're saying is Meta and Facebook and Instagram ads, while they have become horrible for direct response advertising, given the lack of measurement and attribution through ATT, you think that there are an underpenetrated platform for brand advertising at the top of the funnel, which essentially it always was that, except it just had ridiculously good measurement for a brand advertising channel. And effectively what you're saying is, hey, this now should go into the brand budget and not the direct response budget, given the changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've hit such a great insight. That's what it originally was there for. And obviously over time, measurement changed and became so direct response. But yeah, exactly. If you think about certain platforms, even YouTube, I really like YouTube like so much for upper funnel and just mass reach. It's not the best with click through and you're not going to get a bunch of sales through it because people are just focused on that viewership. But if you hit the right frequency in YouTube and great creative, I think it is wonderful. There's just been great data around what it can do for your kind of branded search and kind of lower funnel performance.
And so let's continue to dive in on this. If I'm an e-commerce first brand, in which I'm not a multinational CPG brand that's running linear TV campaigns on an always on basis, but I'm an e-commerce first brand, whether that be via marketplaces or whether that be D2C, maybe transitioning into retail first as I begin to scale. And I have a budget of 40 percent of my total marketing budget that should be allocated towards brand and upper funnel. So you mentioned Meta, you mentioned YouTube. What other channels should I be investing in order to allocate that budget as appropriately as possible?
I think Google is a great one. And CTV, obviously, if your budget can hack it, it's not cheap. But YouTube, I'm super bullish on. Programmatic, display, honestly, TikTok, even paid TikTok. There's been some really great data. Fabletics actually recently, in 2022, did a paid TikTok campaign. But instead of trying to drive to the site and try to drive commerce outcomes, they focused on just email signups for their VIP program. And they saw thousands more in registrations, I think over 10x more in signups, 15x decrease in signup costs, just acquisition costs for their VIP signup program. And so I think if people use paid TikTok and even paid Meta right to drive upper funnel outcomes, meaning not just impressions, but email signups, visits to the website, I think that there could be great success. So it's just about shifting what success looks like, I think, for upper funnel and trying to bring people obviously down the funnel.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that I've experienced over the past year is in coaching brands how to think about creators, and in particular on TikTok. And in many instances, people are starting to invest in creators that hadn't before at scale. So I want to launch a creator campaign, one to many, have creators promote my products. I pay them. It appears as organic content on something like TikTok. And then the question ultimately becomes, what should my budget be on that? How much should I budget across all creator campaigns? And effectively what I say is that the creator campaign budget should be a function and a ratio to your total brand budget, and probably start in the like experimental test and learn. 10% of your total brand budget should go to your first creator campaign over a 2-month period, and then see how that performs. Boost it with Spark ads on TikTok if it's working well. And the collective fee of Spark ads plus organic content should go to the overall basket of brand marketing. And that's something that I've been really intrigued by. What about the retail media platforms and their connected TV offerings? Like STV via Amazon DSP is something that people have been talking about for a long time. Have you seen folks investing in other connected TV retail media arms?
I'm so excited about Kroger and what Kroger has been doing. Kroger has been, obviously folks in this space know that 8451 and Kroger Precision Marketing now are just best in class. They really lead the marketing capabilities, but obviously they're smaller than Amazon and Walmart in size from e-com, but their data is incredible that they have. In September of 2022, they've actually launched as part of their programmatic inventory, CTV and video inventory, which is so exciting. I know some of the large agency players, Omnicom, Publicis, are also investing pretty heavily in this measurement of offsite inventory to retail media and sales objectives. So I know Instacart has a partnership also in the CTV space. There's just a lot happening. One of my predictions for next year is this will be the power partnership of 2023, because it's really starting to connect upper funnel video with actual commerce outcomes and objectives and sales. And so that's really exciting. It's also dangerous because it could do the opposite effect, right? Is folks could see, okay, well, directly, we're not seeing a lot of sales. And so there's obviously attribution windows are going to be a hot topic. Multi-touch attribution is going to be a hot topic. I'm sure we'll get into AMC as well, but I think where the industry's going. And so Kroger, I think, leading the charge will really pressure others. Obviously, Amazon's had this inherently with Fire TV. The only media that's growing just as fast as retail media is CTV. And so there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. You said Kroger's data is so good. Why is it so good? You're not the first person I've heard that from. What is so good about Kroger's data?
They made investments for many years before Walmart, before Target, to really track their loyalty data. And so Kroger just has a very high penetration of folks that are part of the Kroger loyalty card data. So Walmart, that's always the issue, is because Walmart doesn't have that kind of loyalty program, it's hard to actually track at the user ID level. Purchase, Walmart, so much of Walmart sales are cash. Kroger, it's less. That's why Kroger's data is so good. And they just made really early investments to structure their data and house their data in a way that's accessible by media platforms and SSPs. And so that's why Kroger is like, if they were any larger, I think they're like the envy from a capability perspective. They're just unfortunately a bit smaller from an e-com perspective, but no, they have great data.
That's obviously why they're acquiring someone like an Albertsons to
Yes.
accelerate that footprint. That's interesting you say that, because you say so. Walmart's disadvantage is their lack of ubiquitous loyalty program. Company that has really good ubiquitous loyalty program, if not the best, Amazon, their lack of a competitive advantage is retail footprint. And so effectively what Kroger has is really good e-com, really good in-store, really good loyalty, and they're able to weave the customer journey across all three to provide incredible audience building capabilities across effectively the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why brands really love leaning into Kroger, especially grocery brands. It doesn't get the spotlight, I think, as much because they're a little more niche than Walmart and Target, but they're still a power player in the retail media space.
And I don't know this, and forgive me if I'm putting you on the spot for this direct question. So I know that I can buy connected TV inventory from Walmart via their Trade Desk partnership. I can buy connected TV inventory from Amazon DSP via the variety of owned and operated properties that they've bought or built, like IMDb, Twitch, Prime Video. I think there are a few more. Where is that inventory coming from Kroger? How do I buy connected TV ads with the Kroger data? Is it through a Trade Desk partnership, or is there other partnerships that I don't know about?
I think it's OpenX. I can get back to you on that, but I'm almost sure it's OpenX. It's not the Trade Desk, but it's one of their competitors.
Okay. And OpenX is a Trade Desk competitor. I don't know OpenX. So.
I will send you. I literally looked at this last week, so I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
I'm
that's
just
okay.
deeply interested. And then the natural discussion with all of this, and you alluded to it a couple of times, is the measurement of this. And there's been a variety of technological investments to measure the customer journey. We spoke about that with Kroger. What are some tools that have you really excited right now on the measurement space once brands are making that upper funnel investment?
Yeah, I'm really excited about AMC, Amazon Marketing Cloud. I know Perpetua's launched AMC Bolt, which I think is an incredible offering and will take off. But I think what Amazon Marketing Cloud really is, it's basically a database of a lot more data that you had access to before. You still need SQL. People can write code for the most part to access it. If you want to self-serve, you can use tools like AMC Bolt, part of Perpetua, to just quickly visualize some of that data. So I think there's a lot of benefit, and there'll be a lot of innovation and technology that comes out around AMC next year. That's essentially where measurement's going. With CTV in particular, I'm actually spending more time with folks from my old media world to understand more about it, just because even myself, I'm not an expert that I feel like I need to be. But what I do understand, it's measured on CPMs, like the traditional kind of viewership, but there's addressability issues that are still there with connected TV. And there's also innovation happening around switching away from that CPM model especially for CTV, and thinking about what attention really is. Like, you think about eyeball tracking, like how do you really measure attention? And so it's just going to be really interesting to see how that plays out over time. And I know there's some industry groups that are trying to advocate for that. But measurement is, I think, at least in the commerce and marketplace world, is going to be really driven by AMC next year, is going to get a lot of spotlight, and just getting more from the retailers like Walmart Connect and Roundel, trying to just drive more standardization so you can actually do cross comparisons and measurement. That's really hard to do today.
Why move off of the CPM model? This is the first I've heard of this. I thought CPM model is good for everyone. Why is there an impetus towards moving off of that?
I think it's more just around like just viewing something versus actually getting attention. And so I think about this a lot, right? As I think about even like Meta and even my own habits on the internet, right? Almost been trained to just scroll through. And I'm sure someone somewhere is paying for that impression, but didn't really grab any attention. So if it's a mix of impressions with number of seconds, that someone's actually viewed it, like how do you really measure attention versus just viewability? Is it contextual? So maybe you get more points from an attention perspective if you're being served in a more contextual environment. People a lot smarter than myself trying to figure that out. But that's something I've thought about in theory, and people are trying to actually put math behind it, which will be interesting to see what that looks like.
I found that the completion rate is a really good metric for this, and that people see the completed ad on connected TV properties much higher than it would be on like an OLV display ad. OLV display ad would be a video ad that just appears in display inventory that I could very easily ignore, but an advertiser might still get view through attribution for my eyeball on that display ad. Whereas connected TV, in some instances, it's impossible to fast forward through the ad. And in many instances, there's friction, right? If I'm watching a connected connected TV property on my couch, maybe I don't want to pick up the remote. If I think about, I have a young daughter, you have a young, not baby anymore, but an infant, and I'm now watching much more YouTube than ever before and seeing many more YouTube ads on my TV, not like on my phone or on my computer. And it's very difficult to hide from those ads. Like those ads are going to exist. I don't pay for YouTube Premium yet, but those ads are going to exist. So I think the allure of connected TV is that there is that completion rate. And I think that's why CPMs are like 5 to 6 to 7 times. And in the instance of, I think, Netflix's CPMs that they were most recently charging was almost like 10 times that of your typical display ad, is because you get that richness of creative plus the completion rate.
Exactly. So it's just about putting a number behind that. Exactly. So you can say, like right now, if you compare the $65 CPM of a Netflix or 40 plus CPM or $20 plus CPM of a Hulu versus the $5 CPM on like a Meta or something, it just looks so different. It's just hard to make decisions. So how do you standardize that so you can start to think about attention differently? And so that'll be cool to see how that plays out.
Did you see the most recent news? We're shooting this in December 2022. It'll likely air sometime in Q1 of 2023. So this is recent. That will be dated news that Netflix had to actually needed to give money back to advertisers because they couldn't fulfill the inventory. That's a really interesting thing, in that Netflix came out with this outrageously high CPM number that far exceeds many other CTV platforms because people are aware of the power of Netflix. And effectively, it seems that they've sold out that inventory, which isn't bought programmatically, which is bought on an insertion order, but they had to give the money back.
I heard about that. I did. To your point that they didn't have the inventory, but I think that will change as more people get signed up and be on the subscription that actually serves ads. I think it'll be a matter of time. It's good that they did the make good, but I think it'll change over time. But I did hear about that. Not the best start, but hey, it's a start.
I think more than anything, and I think this is a good way to wrap up our discussion on CTV and brand marketing, that they were able to sell out that inventory after effectively saying in their quarterly earnings at the end of Q1 that this is something that they're probably looking into in Q4 of 2022, an era in which people are cutting brand budgets. They were able to sell out that brand inventory. Really speaks to the promise of CTV to brands. Brands want rich inventory with incredible reach and opportunities to get that attention and completion rate that you're not going to be able to get on a display ad. And so kudos to Netflix for being able to achieve that. And I think that obviously giving the money back is a really great way to continue to build trust with those advertisers that they need to continue to build trust with. But that they were able to do this at all in such a short period of time is quite remarkable. And as we now think of everyone is becoming a retail media company, everyone is becoming a connected TV company, it just shows the revenue potential of advertising for inventory that is currently not being served by ads. If you own rich, powerful inventory that has incredible reach, people will throw money at you because they see the opportunity. Like, people aren't dumb.
Yep. 100%. It's a blessing and a curse, because it's almost like as soon as that starts happening, I thought about even my own relationship with Netflix, right? And like, I pay for the subscription, but what does that do to the attention and the magic of the platform? As soon as you start introducing ads on it, are people going to watch it less? And are people going to shift to this new space that they can generate attention? I think it'll be interesting to see the evolution of what's next and where attention really goes. And how do you insert ads in an environment that hasn't had ads for so long? And people love it maybe because it doesn't have ads. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Totally. I want to move to a topic that is near and dear to your heart, given your past few employers. As I mentioned at the top, Aisha was Chief Strategy Officer at Packable. Packable is or was one of, if not the largest 3P reseller on Amazon. So effectively, Packable bought tons and tons of goods from manufacturers and resold it in a 3P model. And so that's one. And then two, most recently, GM of Forum Brands. Forum Brands is one of the quote unquote Amazon aggregators that's raised a ton of money, acquired a bunch of brands in the not too distant past. I think the best part to start this discussion is just understanding the world of 3P on something like an Amazon, and understanding the unit economics of being a 3P seller and some of the changes that have occurred over the past 3 years. So maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I'd love to. The 3P world it's tough. It's tough to make money in the 3P world and marry that up with just the increasing costs of the past few years. And it's interesting because I started my career actually in the 1P world. And I remember at the time it was 2014, 2015. I remember at the time a lot of new brands who were entering Amazon just went 3P. A lot of them were like, hey, 3P is the way to go, get more flexibility, the costs are better, 1P takes a lot of margin.
And this is like 6-7 years ago. You worked at Johnson & Johnson. So even brands the size of Johnson & Johnson were like, hey, let's go the 3P route. I think this is a better route for us.
They were 1P, but they were looking at disruptor brands in the space to go 3P. Like they tested incubating brands and just would do that 3P. And so that's really interesting. If you think about that, one of my predictions for next year is like, that's going to start to change. I think the 3P model has gotten really expensive. I think there used to be more efficiencies there, but Amazon's really begun squeezing. And so the state of the 3P world, whether you're a reseller, an aggregator, a brand, anyone who sells 3P, there are some realities to what's changed. And if you think about some of the biggest costs, it's FBA fulfillment. So just in 2022 alone, FBA fees increased on average around 5%. But with small standard size items, regardless of weight, up 8%, large items up 8% in fees. In addition to that, in April of this year, they added a 5% fuel surcharge to FBA fees. Storage fees are up 10%. They increased February 2022. And this is in addition to 2021 increases, 2020 increases. This happens every year. And I think, again, any business model that you're in, if you're selling 3P, you're getting squeezed. And I don't see this velocity slowing down for next year either, frankly, is I actually think that while inflation is still up and the rate of inflation is decreasing, I actually think Amazon will hold steady in the actual rate of increase for next year because they can marry that up with returns, just with less friction of returns. In some categories, Amazon's began to release data around category averages for things like conversion, return rates, which is great. You can start to benchmark success a little better using Amazon data itself. They have like Product Opportunity Explorer, a lot of great data that they're starting to release. And in some categories like home goods, return rates have doubled on average versus 2020. And that might not seem like a lot, but that's a lot. That directly impacts the net sales line of your P&L. That is a pretty big impact to your overall P&L's returns. And that's been increasing. And then ad costs are up. No surprise, CPCs are up, labor costs are up, and that's tough. And so thinking about those increasing costs, while resellers and aggregators have different business models and different parts of the P&L that matter most, every single part of the P&L is getting squeezed for 3P sellers. And so overall, it's just really tough to maintain profits, nonetheless grow profits, especially in a more constrained macro environment.
And so if I'm understanding this correctly, across FBA fees, storage costs, and fuel surcharge costs, Amazon on aggregate has increased fees by, let's call it 15 to 20% for every single 3P seller.
Yes.
And that 15 to 20% is basically all bottom line. So all of the profits that you had are now squeezed by an additional 15 to 20% of costs that you did not have before.
Yes. So if you think about the idea of the aggregator model, which is to buy these brands and make them more efficient, sometimes that's just to stay even versus your previous year, right? That's the tough part, is the rate of your efficiency has to be faster than the rate of cost increase. And it's not just a game of, hey, you buy the brands. We talked about this earlier. You enhance the brand, you put in better content, you're more efficient by your advertising, SEO, right? Even operating, great. But you need to be good at so many things. The supply chain, even though shipment costs are down, so the cost of actually pallets are down and shipping from China is down, the cost of goods sold is still pretty high. And if you think about freight as a percentage of overall supply chain goods, it's still not as much as COGS in most cases. And so it's just, that's where the aggregator model gets really tough. Is I actually think in theory it makes sense. You buy these brands and you make them more efficient. You can scale them. That makes sense. It's just the rate of cost increases are very high, particularly on Amazon.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the costs and the business model indictments towards the aggregator model tend to center around two things, which is one, raising capital on onerous terms, in particular debt, and then two, buying the brands at overly inflated multiples on EBITDA, when effectively what you're saying is those two things might be an issue and they might be getting the headlines for a reason. But actually what's happened is that the P&L has fundamentally changed over the past 2 years, in which any notion of profits that these 3P seller accounts were accumulating are now discounted by the additional 20-ish% of fees that people weren't paying before.
Yeah, I like to answer this question very broadly because it's less about the reseller model and the aggregator model. I don't think enough folks realize this is a macro 3P issue. And it's not like aggregators failing in any way or resellers failing in any way. It's just a challenge of the overall 3P environment that Amazon's created and them trying to recoup costs of their investments that they've made in supply chain and logistics. We knew it was coming at some point. And so it seems like every year those costs are going up.
And so I would like to unbundle those business models a little bit, because I think that you have a unique perspective that might be able to shed light into them for other folks. So can you tell us what exactly is the reseller model? I know that we spoke of Packable, but there are large companies still doing this with, I believe, some success. They still exist and they're still growing. A company like Pattern and Spreetail come to mind as large resellers. So what exactly is the reseller model? And in particular, why is it so alluring for a brand to go to that reseller rather than using a 1P relationship with an Amazon or selling directly on Amazon as a 3P?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll start with your first one. The reseller model, there's really two types. One is a consignment model where reseller is essentially a partner. Think of them almost like a fulfillment agency. So they will hold inventory for you. They don't buy it. They just hold inventory for you. And when you make a sale on Amazon, they fulfill it for you. So they're a little bit like almost like a fulfillment partner. You can think of them that way. And then there's actual resellers. Most of them actually take inventory risk, meaning they'll buy your products at wholesale price and they'll sell it on marketplaces for you. So you don't have to deal usually with the fulfillment of those things. You just ship them the inventory, almost like another wholesale customer. You ship them the goods and then they sell it for you. In that model, they essentially act like a retailer, but they're still selling it in marketplaces. And so that's enticing because we just talked about the cost of going 3P on your own, like getting more expensive. So that's tough. I think the FBM model, so the fulfillment by merchant model, is essentially what the resellers are playing on. They're playing on this idea of risk diversification away from FBA. You have FBM. More folks are becoming comfortable with slightly longer shipping times on Amazon. There's a lot of data around that. And so if you can sell your product with 3 or 4 day shipping on Amazon, you might lose your Prime badge. But if you have a great product, great branding, like I actually think the Prime badge is becoming less important than price. So if you have a good price and a decent shipping time, you can find a great FBM partner. You can decrease costs quite significantly by doing that. So that's essentially why you could go the reseller route, is you don't have to worry about all the logistics and the advertising and the kind of demand generation around your products. And you can just trust the marketplace experts to do that for you. And you can do that either just by having fulfillment partnership. You can have fulfillment and a marketing partnership with them. Some of the resellers, especially the ones you mentioned, will even take care of your advertising for you. And so it's almost like you're getting agency and fulfillment services in one by going the reseller route.
What are some of the challenges of doing that for brands? So some brands obviously went that route. And then what are some of the challenges for resellers? Like, why doesn't it work out? It sounds like a great model for everyone if the unit economics make sense. When doesn't it make sense?
Yeah, the reseller model becomes popular for two reasons. A brand would choose a reseller versus 1P, usually because 1P won't take them. It's usually a profitability issue. And so the idea is resellers can't wave a magic wand, though, and make something that's heavy with low ASP work. And so I think that's where kind of the misconception has been, is that resellers are this like magic wand. I think if 1P can't be profitable, they'll crap out your item. So they'll say they can't realize a profit on it and they literally won't buy it from you. So if you have a large assortment, but most of your items are in distribution through 1P, you still need to sell the rest of your portfolio somehow on Amazon. And so that's where resellers can be a great fit. For some brands, you can put your entire portfolio in it for a reseller, but that's how the reseller model kind of started. It started out by being this backstop for more of the unprofitable items. And so these resellers would do things, and this is what Packable was really great at. They were great at multi-packing. So take an item like Listerine as an example. One of my products I sold at J&J when I was there, it's a $5 mouthwash, cost $6 to ship the thing. And so the only way we could really make that profitable is by selling it as like a 3-pack or a 6-pack via Packable. They would multi-pack it for us because they had that logistics expertise, fulfillment expertise, and we could sell it more profitably through them. And so Amazon, unfortunately, the 1P business was unwilling to do those things at that time. And so that's what we use the reseller model for. So definitely as a place, there's definitely the ability to be profitable in a reseller model. I think you need to have 3 things. You need to have really strong negotiated margin with your partners. So whoever your partners are and the brands that you work with, you need to have a good margin there, one that works mutually. You need to have really world-class demand planning and logistics expertise and that fulfillment expertise, because we just talked about how the costs are going up. And then lastly, there needs to be some sort of commitment or joint business plan on how the brand itself is going to generate pull-through and demand. So are they going to be doing their connected TV ads? Are they going to be doing their meta ads, their influencers? Because that's usually where resellers don't have expertise. They're really good usually at Amazon or Walmart search and demand media execution, but less so on the brand side. And so they lean on brands for that. Having and working with brands that can partner with you on that so that you're not left holding the bag. You just bought a ton of inventory and it's not moving anymore. It can be tough. That's probably one of the hardest of those 3 legs, but you've got to have all 3 of them to succeed in the reseller space, which is challenging. Margins are slim.
And in aggregators, where do things work? And where do things not work?
Yeah, I think what is interesting is I think aggregators have an opportunity actually to think about 1P. You think about aggregators and they're like, oh yeah, FB aggregators. But I actually think like 1P, if you have the right brand, one that's large enough, there's enough brand identity behind it and social presence for it, that 1P is interested. Like I think aggregators should actually go 1P as much as they can. I actually think the margins are better. It's an easier business to also operate if you think about it from like a day-to-day basis. You still have to deal with it, but you don't have to deal with as much with case management and chargebacks, which gets really expensive. You need to hire a lot of folks to manage those with large assortments. And I think that's a big opportunity for aggregators. I think the portfolios themselves have to be, in order for aggregators to be successful, you obviously need to be great at operating, but you really also need to have a portfolio that works and one that's defensible. And I think that's hard. If you think about the valuations needed to make the aggregator model successful, it doesn't lend itself so much to buying like big, sexy brands that invested a lot. You get these brands that have some brand presence, but they might just be best sellers in whatever their categories are. And so for aggregators, really understanding not just the brand P&L and the EBITDA and all that, but it's also around the future defensibility of some of these brands. Like if you're in a really highly commoditized category where Chinese sellers entering the space and just beating you on price, having tons of ratings and reviews, now whether they use white hat or black hat tactics, doesn't really matter. They're there and they're coming in pretty aggressively. That's something to look out for. That's where aggregators just need to be pretty mindful next year of their acquisitions in terms of, yeah, like the P&L looks great, the growth is there, but can we actually keep growing profitably? Are there large entrants entering with large ad spend? What is the rate of CPC increases? It's tough, but feasible. So I'm bullish on the model overall, but it's got to fit certain criteria. So not all portfolios are set up for success the same.
And when you speak of portfolios, one of the things that I'm unsure of, because we work with some aggregators, we don't work with all, and I know some perspectives of a few of them, but for the most part, aggregators have acquired brands in a category agnostic way, in which the notion of creating this portfolio of brands is almost irrelevant, given that they work in so many different categories and there's no cross-selling, there's no notion of creating like a brand halo effect across other brands and products. Whereas I think where aggregators might be able to succeed is around creating portfolios around verticals in which they have a strategic directive and a strategic goal, and they've acquired brands within a very specific portfolio and vertical. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. There's a really great survey that came out recently by Fortia Group of 34 aggregators and their positions for next year, their deal flow this year versus last year. What's really interesting is overwhelmingly the top category of interest, there's 3 of them for next year, is wellness and beauty, pet, and then baby and family. Sports and outdoor, less so. Home goods, less so. And it's not surprising because you think about LTV in the space is more conducive to repeat purchase. ASPs are higher. Like when you have low ASP on Amazon, it doesn't matter what category you're in, it's just hard to be profitable. And so this idea of being like, I call it mastige or premium, I think is also enticing. That's where you get into different valuation multiples where aggregators haven't traditionally gone because of the financial engineering that's done. They need to be at lower multiples. And the good news is multiples have come down. So they may be able to pick up assets that are these mastige or premium price points at lower valuations versus last year and the previous year. Those brands were really expensive. And so that's exciting to see potentially where that goes. The challenge will now be everyone's gotten smart to that. There's going to be a lot of competition for those assets. So one of my recommendations would just be to go really niche. So even within wellness and beauty, even within pet or within baby and family, I think having really clear niches are going to be really important. Otherwise, to your point, you're just throwing darts at the board where everyone else is throwing darts at the board. So yeah, I think focus will be important to be successful next year.
So the answer to the future of aggregators is pay more for the right brands, higher valuations?
That would be my recommendation. If I was an aggregator, I would definitely do that. And we talked a little bit earlier about brand identity and brand story. It's very hard to create that after the fact. And if you think about wanting to go omni-channel, which is everybody wants to do that, digital brands going omni-channel, in-store buyers want brands with story, with social presence, with an influencers behind it that are genuine and authentic. And so that's hard to manufacture after the fact. So even if you're buying great products, if there's no brand story to it and you try to attach it after the fact, it's just buyers can see right through that. So I think there'll also be a bit more focus on understanding the value of taking off Amazon brands to Amazon. Because traditionally these FBA aggregators buy FBA brands, so brands that are already on Amazon and doing well and try to make them even better. I think there will be a push to buying D2C brands that are good and then bringing them to Amazon and then having that synergy between both. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens.
Yeah, it makes total sense. We're nearing time and you've alluded to a few predictions already. I may have let you know that we end every episode with predictions for the new year. I'll say a few that you can't say because you've already said them as predictions earlier. CTV and retail media becoming a powerful partnership. Brands investing in best-in-class creative and copy, shifting more towards FBA. These are all predictions that we've stated already. What would be one that we have not stated yet that you'd like to make for 2023?
Sure. I love the technology space and the SaaS space and just seeing how companies evolve, Perpetua included. I think there's always every year like a hot type of e-com tech. For 2022, I would say it probably was around market share and digital shelf insights was like the tool and capability to focus on. And there was a lot of great development and innovation. One of my predictions is for next year, it will actually be around price elasticity. With all that's happening with inflation and the economy, and we talk so much about advertising and content and all of that today, I think price is going to be so important in getting the price right. So I think pricing elasticity, technology, measurement solutions will be the new hot emerging space for next year. We'll see if I'm right, but that's my big prediction.
Fun. Are there any that catch your eye right now that you're excited by?
Not yet. I know of a few being built, so I'm not going to steal their thunder, but I know of multiple companies separately that are creating pricing elasticity tools and models. I won't steal their thunder. So none that have been released yet, but I know that there's many that are planned to release in Q1 of 2023.
All right. Exciting. We'll be sure to look out for those. Aisha, thank you very much. This was an awesome conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. No, this was great. Thank you.
In the next episode,
I think being a challenger brand and expecting it to happen quickly on Amazon is really not easy in this day and age. But what I would say is maybe the reasons you wouldn't launch on Amazon before, from brand building to data and owning the customer, quote unquote. I think that's one I hear a lot. Those are things that you can now accomplish on Amazon, and the idea of maybe owning the customer isn't as critical as you think it is, and people want to buy where they want to buy. You likely buy on Amazon all the time, and so it's really being there for your consumer wherever they want to buy, whatever reason or time is, I think is super important, and Amazon is no doubt a part of that customer journey now.
Join us in the next episode for a chat with Daniel Miller, Chief Growth Officer at Beekeepers Naturals. The episode drops March 9th. This is Growth Sessions, a podcast to fuel your e-commerce growth. Listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.